morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this latest iteration of the Indic Book Club's Writers Open House with Otis. And for those of you who have been dialing in, and there are a few who have been dialing in every single week, you know how it goes. But for those who are joining for the first time or after some time, we invite writers and authors to send their writing samples, typically 800 words or so, to Otis, and the link is provided in a post that we had shared as well as the newsletter that went out. And you provide this writing sample a few days or as much in advance as you can, and Otis goes through it. He marks it up with his comments, feedback, and sends it back to you. And then in this open house on Sunday, he discusses it. The writing piece with people. He'll generally ask people to read out a paragraph or two for everyone, and then he'll just use that writing piece and the feedback to talk about the general points of writing and points of view and how narration works, and basically, all the good things about the good writing that we are in that we should know or we can all benefit from. Now, in addition to that, what we also thought was that, as some of you or most of you hopefully would know, that we launched in November, or a little before that actually, we launched the Indic Book Club's 1000 Reviewers Club, and we send out, and we have sent out more than about, I think, 1,000 books now to more than 800 people, and we'll be sending out even more in the next few months. The intent is to send out these books to people and who are interested in reading based on the topics of interest that they've specified, and ask them to write reviews and submit them and post them on Amazon, on Goodreads, on their own blog, on Facebook, or wherever. And why are we doing that? Because, see, one of from a reader's point of view, a good review helps make up their mind whether they want to buy a book, read a book, or not. And the better the review, the more it helps in influencing. I, for example, know that when I go to Amazon, I'm browsing through books, I go through reviews because it gives me a good sense of what the book is about and why I may want to read it or not. From a writer's point of view, right? The more the reviews, the more the chances that people will come across the book and make up their mind to buy the book. Also, if a review is well written, it will not only highlight what went well with the book, but also what could have been improved or what readers didn't like. And that is invaluable feedback for any writer to use, incorporate as they see fit, and improve their work. So what we'll be doing for the next couple of weeks or so is, you have a choice. You can send in a writing piece, an original writing piece that you want critiqued, or if you have a review that you think can be improved, or you just want feedback on, is this something that contains all the elements of a good review, then please send that instead to Otis, and we will follow pretty much the same process. Otis will review them, he'll provide his feedback, and we'll discuss those. So for today, we'll break the time up between a couple of writing samples and then about the reviews. So with that, over to you, Otis.
Okay, thank you, Abhinav. We just talked. I was looking at the pieces, and given what you just said about the reviews, we were talking about doing the writing samples, the creative pieces first, and then talking about reviews. But I think maybe if it's okay, I think it might be interesting if we talk about reviews and then we talk about the writing because you said something that's pretty important. Um, that writing writing a review basically I feel is going to help us as a writer, and in pretty short order. I mean, the things that I have to say about writing a review are absolutely applicable to our writing a story too. And the thing that's essential to all storytelling, basically, from my point of view, is that we engage the reader. Yeah, that we engage the reader. So the way we engage the reader basically is by creating some kind of excitement on the page. And the way we create excitement on the page is by having two forces that collide against each other. It is basically always the same. Okay, so let's say in a review, we really like a book. And we say, we really like a book. Okay, this will be, you'll forgive me, but this will be a quiz. Is that two forces? No, it's not. And so, like that, just take that single principle. All of you who are working on stories, I will just tell you, if you're just going to present one thing, basically, I divide these up. I mean, whatever fancy jargon aside, I divide it up into protagonist force and antagonist force. The difference between protagonist force and antagonist force is nothing, basically. There's no difference between them. It's only a question of which one you're choosing to emphasize and talk about. So I can switch these around and I can tell a story from the antagonist point of view, but whichever point of view I'm taking, that's the one that's called protagonist. That's all. They're called the protagonists. They're not the hero. They're not like better than other people. They're not fabulous. Nothing. They are just the point of view that I'm taking. It's a point of view, and that's versus another point of view. So in every story, if our purpose is, and our purpose should be, to engage someone other, okay, this will be important too. We want to engage someone other than ourselves. Okay, so like we we're not just trying to write for an audience who is exactly like us. Because if they were, like, for example, in a review, if they were exactly like us, they would have already read this book. Does that make any sense? Like, if
Yeah.
they shared all your same passions and they had all your same experiences, they would have also read the book. They would have lived your exact life, right? So we're not writing for that person. We're writing for someone other than ourselves. They are very much like us, but they haven't had our experiences. And in order to engage them, we have to do exactly the same. We can't just say, I love this book, and since you're exactly like me, you're going to love the book too. What we do instead is we try to engage that reader, and we do that by presenting these two forces. Um, so I, I hope you are part of this review club because I wrote a little description about how to write reviews, and basically the way I feel about that description is that it should really help you both in your reading. It should help you in the end write a review, but it should first help you in your reading of a book, and then next it should help you in your own writing, and then lastly it should help you write a good review. Basically, when I say a good review, I don't mean a good review in which you say the book is good. I mean a good review in which the book is engaging to the reader. And that basically means that they read it, they have a sense of the protagonist and antagonistic forces in the book. They also have a sense of you being engaged as a kind of protagonistic force against the antagonistic force of the book, that there's a kind of real engagement there. It's not just like, I think you're wonderful. This book is like, cold ice cream on a hot summer day. It's just great. They don't feel that. They feel that you actually have a kind of critical engagement with the book, which means that you're doing work for the reader. Um, so, so let's see if I can share this a little bit. I'll go through what I wrote for uh, the Reviewers Club. Let's see if I can make this happen. And did, is that sharing?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So, okay. So, by the way, for you writers, you can find your best programs, but and I really should get something back from Scrivener for what I say about Scrivener all the time. But Scrivener is a great program and very helpful for us. Um, the and if you look into Scrivener, you might see how it can be useful. But anyway, so you'll see that I have a screen with Scrivener on it, and I wrote this this sort of primer about how to write reviews. So um, I'm saying that we want to present the main thesis. So whether it's a fiction book, so in every single story that's effective, basically, I am suggesting that we can find these protagonist and antagonistic forces. It as I want to say, like, lay readers, as the casual readers, we sometimes call them, as casual readers, we don't pay attention to these things as distinct things. We just go to the movies, right? We see Batman and Dr. Evil, right? We just go to the movies and we enjoy it. That's all we're doing. As readers, we just enjoy the work. But the thing is, we can distinguish that Batman is the protagonist and Dr. Evil is the antagonist when we become writers. So every story that works has these forces in it, and so the first thing I basically ask you to figure out when you're reading, and I obviously can't take you through it personally with each and every work, but I want you to try and work out what are these forces and basically identify them. The more you can identify them as being actually personified, like actually people and not just ideas, the more you can actually personify these, the more dramatic and dynamic the interaction of these forces will be. And so I'm just calling that the thesis, right? So if you were going to the movies, if you were going to the movies with Batman and Dr. Evil, right? So the thesis there is that there's a conflict between good and evil, kind of. And we're going to find out which one is going to triumph. That's the thesis. Every story, in a sense, has a thesis, as strange as that might seem. Um, I note here that a review is not really for your personal opinion. Um, I I kind of ask, I suggest that you refrain from subjectivity because that, whether you say good things or bad things, it leads the reader of the review not to trust you to some degree. Um, in in a review, we want to do what we do in good storytelling. We want to show and don't tell. So basically, we want to show the dynamic interaction that's in the book. We want to put that in our review so that the reader can experience it for themselves, if that makes sense. We don't just tell them whether, in the end, whether the book is good or bad. We basically present the dynamic action, and then if that dynamic action engages the reader, then they will be interested in buying the book, is basically what I'm suggesting. Um, and in a review, it's short, but a review should work in the same way that a story works. Basically, you begin someplace. Every story has this essential structure. And this is something for all of us, for all of our writing. This essential structure holds for every single story, I think, that has been written, basically. Except for those that don't ascribe to this structure, and then they tend to fail and we don't know about them. They have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have an ending. So what that means, as cryptic as that might sound, is that the beginning does the work of the beginning, the middle does the work of the middle, and the ending resolves, in a sense, the issue of the beginning. That's what that structure in a simple way ends up meaning. And the beginning is a very important place to look at. So what is the work of the beginning? The work of the beginning is to engage the reader. The work of the middle is to prepare us, essentially, for the resolution. And the work of the ending is to resolve the issues that were described in the beginning. That's a simple format of basically every story. Our review would want to be similar to that. So if we look at our review, we want our beginning to engage the reader. We want our middle basically to give some preparation I've sometimes called the middle the duration of struggle, in which you work with both the protagonist and antagonistic forces back and forth in order to prepare the reader for the resolution of the story. So I sometimes liken that to the middle, the duration of struggle is like the Aikido master, right? So you've opened the book, you've reached out at the Aikido master, and the Aikido master takes you this way, and then they take you this way, right? And then they take you this way, and then the resolution, they throw you on your back. So that's the middle, and then the end is a resolution. And in the case of a review, that's a well, it's not really complicated. You still want to resolve with the issue that you're bringing up. You know, like, does a person really want to? Should they be buying this book? If they're interested in all of this, should they buy it, or maybe they should not buy it? You should resolve in that way. And who specifically might buy it, and who may want to avoid this and look towards something else to buy. Um, Okay, so I just have a few more things. I think the Reviewers Club has sent this out to everyone, so I won't go through everything here. But I make some suggestions basically through this section, like as you're reading and as you're considering the work that you're going to be reviewing, try to draw out these main issues of storytelling. So, what is the main conflict? The main conflict will be between these two things. Try and figure out what that is and write about it on the page somehow. Or, sorry, I'm not talking about writing. Take some notes on it so that you can isolate it for yourself in your thinking. Um, I note here, write down a concrete description of the protagonist, write down a concrete description of the antagonist. Those two notes are going to be important for you to, when you write the review, because you're going to want to put those in the review so that you can show this dynamic struggle, which is the thing that's going to engage your reader, and that's what we're after. Um, and then basically, I don't want to. I think the review process should be creative, but all of us, when we're writing, no matter what we're writing, for good or for good or evil, we are writing within the form of story. So that issue of the structure of beginning, middle, and end, we have to work within that. That's our medium. Our medium is story. It works in a certain way. It works in a certain way because our brains and our human psychology work in a certain way. And so we do have some constraints. But within those constraints, you have a lot of freedom. So I hope you recognize that. I'm not trying to make you write something that's formulaic. It's not formulaic. I don't think it's formulaic to say that we want to write something that's engaging in a story. It just so happens that there is kind of a routine for making that happen. Um, in writing the piece, I suggest some formats, and these are places that you can think about, but my issue is the beginning must engage. And so one of the ways to engage the reader is to begin in media res, which means in the middle of the action. I think it can be very effective to start a review with a quote from the book that drives to the center of the conflict that's being expressed in the book. Um, let's see. This beginning is pretty important. Then once you present the conflict, delve a little bit more deeply into the conflict in your own words, I suggest. Establish the protagonistic forces and antagonistic forces so that the reader can understand what they are. And that's really useful information for when, if they go on to read the book, to understanding the central conflict in the book. So this is a big what do I want to say? This is a way of saying what I think is really important in a review. So someone has written a book in which they've basically investigated. They've spent maybe a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years of their lives sort of investigating a conflict that they think is important, a conflict, right, between these forces. They've been investigating it and writing it, and then they produced it. So that is the work That's the principal work that I think our review ends up doing. They dedicated years of their lives. We're going to dedicate maybe a day or two to writing the review and reviewing it. We're going to devote a day or two to basically isolating that conflict here and then sending it out to, yeah, you have a thousand reviewer book club. So you're going to send that out to a lot of people. So that takes the work that they've done, that they've given years to, and it basically distills it into this very quick and small piece that you then send out into the world. Let's say that, and there's 1,000 of you. Let's say you each reach even 100, or maybe you reach more than that. I don't know, but you reach all these people, and basically you're propagating these ideas out into the universe, if you want to think about it that way. And that is the most valuable thing that the reviewer does. You might be able to see, maybe that it makes sense that if you're doing that, that's a lot more valuable than just expressing your opinion about the book. That's the thing that you're committing to doing. You're not trying to make people think about whether the idea is right or wrong necessarily. You're already, in a sense, doing that by choosing this book. You've chosen this book. You think that the conflict that's being explored in this book is valuable for people, and therefore you're writing about it. That's the main thing that you're doing. You're basically providing a platform to put out those ideas in a distilled form, and that's the point of reviewing. There's some other things that I write here about a review, and I know that that's been sent out to everyone in the Reviewers Club. So I'm going to stop doing that. But I was wondering, first, does anyone have any questions? And then Ram, thank you very much for volunteering, has sent a review that we could talk about a little bit, if that's okay with you, Ram.
Let's do
All
that.
right,
And
is
Otis,
everyone's gone?
I had a question. Uh, so I am assuming that what you're talking about, while it holds good and true for all reviews, this is more focused towards fiction reviews, reviews of fiction books.
No. All books. So basically, the way I see it, the way I understand how our mind works, is we basically are like storytelling and story consuming animals. This is us, and the story form is really applied to everything. So a nonfiction book is still even more so and often more obviously developing a thesis. A thesis is about a conflict between two things. So the general form of a thesis is, you know, this is my reduction of a thesis. A thesis is you think this, right? You're wrong this, right? This is basically you think A, you think that understanding the origins of Madonna's lyrics in her songs is unimportant, or whatever. I'm just trying to put anything there. You're wrong. It's incredibly important, right? So like, there's always two things, and what's actually really great about understanding the thesis in this way is that when you say you think this, right? That you, I'm going to put a little parentheses around them. That you is your audience. You're basically identifying your audience. They're people that believe what we already believe don't need to hear from us. That's the proverbial preaching to the choir, right? We're not trying to communicate to going back again to we're not trying to communicate to people who think exactly what we think. They're not our audience. If they were exactly like us, as I've said, they already would have read that book. They would already believe this thing that you said, right? They already believe that Madonna's lyrics are incredibly important, or whatever it is, and we don't need to communicate with them. We're trying to communicate with someone else. So, what we find in nonfiction, and really there's a lot of different kinds of nonfiction. So, the difference between, let me see if I can say this. So, to my mind, there's really no difference between nonfiction and fiction in this regard. All of these stories have protagonistic forces and antagonistic forces that are at odds. In this case, with this thesis statement, you think this, you're wrong, it is this. The people who are at odds are the audience and the writer. The writer is taking the place of the protagonistic force, and the antagonist is the audience that does not believe what the writer believes. To write then an effective book, actually, means that this writer has to really take into account the antagonist's point of view. If they do not take in the
Mm.
antagonist's point of view, for example, they represent them as like what we call a straw man or something like that, if they do not take in that point of view, then the audience stops listening to them. They're, they put the book down. So, um, and and so in a sense, this is actually this. Let's take this back to the reviews. Okay, so in the review, what you're what you're doing is you're writing a review of a book that deals with a conflict in some certain idea, and you're basically trying to communicate with an audience that does not hold that view already. They don't think that this conflict that you're developing here, they don't think it's important. So your job is to understand them and show them, not tell them, but show them that the conflict is important to them. Then they, your audience in the review, say, wow, this is important. I want to delve more deeply into this. And they buy the book.
Right,
But if
right.
we come in, we think that this book is important, and we just tell this person, wow, it's just great, we're treating them as if they think exactly what we think. If they think exactly what we think, they've already read the book, right? They don't need any convincing. We're trying to get other people to read the book, right?
Correct.
So, so as a principle, the story, as I see it anyway, the story form that that describes how we engage with the world. So yes, it applies to fiction. In fiction, you have your character, you have Batman and Doctor Evil, right? They're the obvious protagonists and antagonistic forces. But again, as I say, if you go to the movies, if you ask most people who's the protagonist, they'd have no idea. They're just excited by the conflict between the two of them. So same thing with any kind of fiction. Any kind of fiction is basically a story about a protagonist against the entire world, right? So you would, and maybe identified with a few particular characters. But if you go up to the nonfiction book, it is about, for example, an author. It's not exactly the person who is the author. It's an author persona, right, who's focused on this issue and saying that this is important for you to know about. And and they basically develop that as the protagonist. If they're a person, they're an actual person with skin in the game too, right? Their professional reputation is at stake, right? Their credentials are at stake. They might be, you might find that they're totally off, right? But they actually have something at stake, just like every protagonist. And the antagonist needs to, I would go back to this, really needs to be dealt with on the page. So this protagonist cannot tell a one-sided story, right? So if they say, you think this, you are just completely idiotic and your ideas are stupid, it's this, right? So they come on and do that. If they're saying that you, the audience, are completely idiotic and you don't have, you're inhumanly stupid, right? This audience is not going to read their work, right? Why would, I mean, it's also, in a sense, if they're so goddamn right about their point of view, why do they even have to make it? Why is it even an argument, right? I mean, Madonna's music is the best music in the world. Okay, everybody knows that. Why do I have to argue it, right? It's like I'm using Madonna because I taught so much university level composition. I don't even want to get into it. It's like, why are you even saying this? What is the point? Um,
No, 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 no. I
and and
completely agree with
and
you.
the
That's
the college
hers is the
level,
best music.
you know. Okay, we missed each other. No, uh, um, but these issues of like the level of writing at the college composition, level. I mean, are germane because that university student, they think that they only need to state their point of view. What they can't do is they can never understand their audience. They can't
So
understand what their audience needs. They don't understand what it. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Otis, I think I have a poor network connection here. So there's a few seconds of lag, which is why I raised my hand. So one question that comes to my mind is that when, say, I'm reviewing fiction, I find it, at least in some cases, easier to review it because there are specific things I can pick out and say that the plot doesn't hang together, or maybe the dialogue is the conversation is very monotonous, or some of the plot points are contrived and so on. I can probably hang a review on those points. Now, if I look at a nonfiction book, even though there is a basic point that is sought to be made in the book, it is divided into these chapters, and each chapter picks a specific point, part of that argument to make its point. And when reading through to the end of the book, when I sit back and say that, okay, I agreed with this book or I did not agree with this book, even though it's a good book, I didn't agree or disagree. Often enough, I find it somewhat overwhelming that there are 15 chapters in the book, and what do I do? Do I briefly summarize all 15 of them? Do I pick one or two to illustrate why I liked it, why I didn't? So these are some of my questions that I usually have when I sit down to write a review.
Hmm. Well, so I think that whether it's fiction or it's nonfiction, the we as reviewers want to try and figure out what is the book about. The book is about a conflict. If it isn't about a conflict of some kind, it is not going to be engaging, and it probably is not going to be a book. So we want to focus our mind on what the conflict is. If the writer has done their job, and this might be a place where I would write, you know, so when I do reading, for example, if if I'm reading for a journal or something like that, and I get stories, if it doesn't matter whether it's fiction, it doesn't matter what it is. If I don't understand the conflict in the first page or so, I know I don't have to read on because the writer has already not defined what the conflict is. So I know that I know if there's no conflict, I also know I don't have a story, as harsh as that is. And I don't have to continue reading this. I don't. It can be 12 pages. It can be 212 pages. But if I don't know what the conflict is, if I don't have any focus for our, if the writer has not framed the issue within, basically contextualized an issue for me, then it's just typing from my point of view. So I can stop. Um, so so this is why I'm sort of suggesting one of the first things we want to do is figure out what is the conflict. So is the conflict in fiction? Is it you know about let's say I'm gonna draw from a typical one. A lonely boy finds himself stranded in the wilderness, faced with survival against all odds. Okay, so That's the issue, right? It's this boy against this reality, right? And it is, like most stories, about someone coming to grips between their subjective understanding of the world and their experience and an objective understanding of what that world and experience is. So it's a journey, right? Um, or it might be, um, let's see, um, this author takes on the difficult proposition that the division of labor has destroyed society and culture. Okay, you're right. So this writer is saying this thing about the division of labor, and they're saying it to all the people who think the division of labor is proper and right and good. So basically, that establishes the conflict. And I understand. I am reading it because I'm a person who was like, well, I think the division of labor is a great thing. So, I'm kind of interested. But if they don't make any sense, or they don't even seem to understand why I think the division of labor is good and deal with that in their argument, all those steps, then I'm not going to read it. So, so Abhinav, let me say, so the conflict is something that should be stated fairly early in the work. We should understand the conflict early on. We don't always. So let me take a popular book. What is this one called? Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell is a genius at writing, basically drawing from science, as I see him anyway, drawing from science, some little aspects of science, and then giving that science to lay people and drawing basically metaphorical connections between things. And in Tipping Point, basically what he says is that, I mean, among other things, there's a couple different examples, but he's basically saying that we can understand trends by understanding viruses. We can understand something about trends from understanding viruses, right? So that's basically what he proposes. Um, the He's reaching a great audience because, in fact, I mean, this is again where he's such a genius, really. Everyone's interested in trends because what are trends? What is it to understand trends? It taps into something that's really universally human, that we're terribly afraid of the future. We want to understand what's going to happen next. And he's basically saying that this is a way to do that. Um, so he states that in the beginning, and so in our review, we can write that. As Abhinav, you're talking about the middle and all those chapters. So this is a place where I don't feel we need to go into it so much when we're reviewing, right? So the middle of a book and the middle of a story is really this is the most difficult territory, really. I mean, yes, beginning writers don't establish a conflict, so we don't even have to read on. But those writers who do understand they have to establish a conflict have then the most trouble in this section, the middle, basically the thing that prepares us for the resolution. And in fact, what a lot of writers do is they have a conflict in the beginning and they already know what the ending is, which is also a big problem. Because if they already know what the ending is and are so sure of it, then I would say maybe the conflict isn't such a conflict after all, right? If you think Madonna's music is trite and silly, you're wrong, it's the best music in the world. Well, if you're going to arrive at it's the best music in the world without having to grapple with it being trite and silly, then you probably didn't need to make the argument in the first place. So anyway, the middle is what I call the duration of struggle, and that basically pits the antagonistic force against the protagonistic force, back and forth, right? The boy's in the woods, a tree falls and breaks his leg. He crawls out from underneath the tree, and a bird comes and pecks his eyes, something. It's like it's going along like that. So that's the duration of struggle. But in a nonfiction book, it's the same. Malcolm Gladwell says, look, it's like viruses work like this. Trends also work like this. You believe that trends are simply, like magic, but in fact they're not. They're something that propagate and they have, definable stages or whatever you want to say. So he's going back and forth too between your arguments that your arguments and his arguments, and he's playing them back and forth. We don't realize it because it happens so naturally and we're so used to it. But in that section, as a reviewer, I think you can kind of pull back a little bit. That is where the real work of writing is done, taking the reader from this place A, where you state your thesis, and bringing them all the way to B, where they accept your thesis, right? That's the big difference. You state your thesis, you take them through the book, and then they either accept or reject your thesis, right? So, um, anyway, it's this is all kind of broad and a little bit abstract. So it's great practice to bring some of these ideas to actual books and try to struggle through doing it, basically. And that's what we end up practicing if we write reviews in this way. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, like, I can talk a blue streak about this, but if you brought me to a book, it will be hard. And I've been doing this for God, I don't even want to talk about it. I mean, I've been teaching since I was 22, and so that's at least 4 or 5 years now. And that's a joke. That was a joke. Okay, Ram, are you up for us taking a look at your work?
Yes. Before that, I have one question actually.
Yeah.
So it's actually two parts to the question. So I read a book, and I let us say that I don't like it or I don't agree with what the book says. So how do I write a negative review? I mean, or rather, let me not call it a negative review. How do I write a review when I have a negative view on the book? And the second part of the question is, it's not that I didn't like the book, but there are some parts of it, or maybe style, maybe execution, or maybe something in that book which I thought was not well done, where I have a very strong view on that. So how do I bring that out in the review? Because if I don't do that, my review won't be honest.
Well, I I think the question is, you know, what do you want to do with the review? Do you want people to not read the book? Do you think that the ideas that are presented in the book are maybe interesting to look at, but the
Mhm.
execution of those ideas failed?
Right.
I mean, so you'll see that, like, so the ideas, like, again, if we say, like, the central conflict, between um, good and evil, is one that's timeless, and it attracts all of our interest. The execution of this timeless story, however, is in danger of being cliche, and that's what I find in this book, right? So you can still do, basically you can do all the things I'm suggesting. There's just a slight, okay. So we have to think to ourselves, what do we want to do? What do we want to spend our time with?
Mhm.
So the worst review you can write for a book is not to write the review. That's the worst review you can write for a book. If you don't think there's anything valuable about it, if you don't think the ideas are intriguing, and you don't think it's well executed, the real issue is, why did you read it? I mean, I would give it up. I wouldn't read that book, right? So,
Right.
but if you read it for some reason. So then it could be that the ideas that are presented in the book are interesting, but the execution of those ideas are not. So now you still want to propagate, basically, you want to filter out the ideas that intrigued you about the book
Mhm.
to a wider audience. But you're going to suggest that if they're interested in these ideas at the end, right? You're going to say, if you're interested in these ideas, you might be interested in this book or this book or this book. This book, it leaves something to be desired in terms of the execution of these ideas, not probing deeply enough into the da 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 da, right? So you can say something
Mhm.
like that.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
that
I see that.
you know, people would people. So you're basically still working on the same premise that there's something in this book that got you to open the pages.
Right.
And then you read through the book and you're like, well, it didn't work out, but these ideas are good. And so if you're a reader that's like, I want you to understand why these ideas are interesting, why you should be reading about them. However, you might not choose this book. You might look at this book,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
Someone might, like, for example, you might, the retelling of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Okay, da 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 da. Is extremely interesting to try and bring the story of Twelfth Night to a modern audience in a retelling. However, this rendition failed to recognize what's necessary to make a story fresh in a modern context. I suggest you just read Twelfth Night by Shakespeare for now and wait for a better modernization to come along.
Okay.
Wow, my God. I wish I'd
Mm.
written that review.
Okay. So I had reviewed a book where I had some negative views on some of the points, and the editor who published it, who published the review, so she said that instead of coming out with a scathing criticism, she said, why don't you give it a twist to say that these were some of the opportunities that the author did not convert well. So these things could probably have been handled better. So I thought that was probably a more positive way of saying,
Yeah.
rather than saying that, okay, this was pathetic. You say that, okay, this situation was handled in this manner. Maybe it was a lost opportunity where that conflict could have been brought out better, etc.
Right. So definitely, so that's really good advice from that editor. And then the other thing to do in balance, though, I really believe, is to also acknowledge the places where it did work, right? So
Of
like
course,
where
of
I
course.
felt they felt, and right, but I want us all to understand why, of course. The why, of course, is because in our review, we want to, right, in our review, we want to present the book. The book has a conflict.
Hmm.
Our review also has a conflict between us and the book, and we
Of
want it to
course,
be balanced.
of
Like, we
course.
don't want to just say, where they fell short here, but you also want to recognize, like, well, I'm able to say that it fell short there, but I'm also able to recognize that this book expanded my vision and that
Right,
there's places that I also need to go. Like, so now you're having a human interaction with it. You're not just one dimensional in terms of your criticism. Um, because again, the reason why that's important is because to whatever degree we seem one dimensional, if we're just saying like, oh, I'm the protagonist and the book, which is this antagonist, we don't even need to discuss it. It's so bad. What the
absolutely.
heck are we even talking about? Right?
Fair point,
So
fair point.
what, right. Why am I doing it? So we have to have the protagonistic force, but we have to have an equal antagonistic force. It must be equal. If these things are not equal, there is no point in us
Right,
basically writing the review. There's no point.
right, right. Yeah, that's good advice.
It's like, why are you writing I'm writing a review about a book that I shouldn't even be writing, because I shouldn't have read the book in the first place. And then you can just say, I'm so sorry I took your time up with this. And then you're
Yeah.
done. It's only 3 sentences.
No, I like what you said, that the reviewer is not the protagonist and the book is not the antagonist, because then, yeah, I might as well not write the review then. Yeah, fair point.
Right. It's obviously got something going for it. So make sure you get that on the page too. But we're getting that on the page not because we're nice people, but because that's what's necessary to communicate with an audience who is not us. We have to present ourselves as a writer as someone who's both capable of seeing something critically and what we say objectively, right?
Right.
I see this objectively, right? It's failing in its way, but I also see myself objectively. I also am a
Ah,
human being. I'm not
okay.
some god that's able to make pronouncements upon all in the
Okay.
world. I
Okay.
see myself objectively. I see that, wait a second, like
Hmm.
when I read Malcolm Gladwell, okay, so this is what happens in Malcolm Gladwell. When a scientist reads Malcolm Gladwell, they say, I hate Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
He his treatment of science is immature and
Right.
and superficial, and he doesn't understand anything. Okay, so that's what a scientist says.
Right.
But I look at the book and I'm like, Malcolm Gladwell is a genius at bringing scientific information to a lay audience.
Of course.
That's what he's doing. He's not involved in original research. He's
Hmm.
involved in creating metaphors that speak to a wide group of people. And
That's right.
therefore, he writes a bestseller.
Right.
What, what, so I don't think the scientists are making a good review because they think that they're reviewing it because everyone's a scientist. It's like, wait a second, you're taking my hard work and you're making a fortune off of it. Why didn't I do that? Well, you didn't
Right.
do that because you don't know how to do what Malcolm Gladwell does.
Right. Yeah. That's a fair point. Yeah.
Like, yeah. So might I come in and write a review and say, Malcolm Gladwell's science is a little thin, but he can explain
Yeah.
complex issues to a lay audience like no one else on earth.
Of course.
I might say that.
Yeah.
You know. Um, so anyway, um, what I am suggesting is that if I hope you'll try and take in. Always try to take things in. Okay, you might not agree with everything I write. I hope to God you don't agree with everything I say, but try and take it in and incorporate it into your thinking a little bit. And if you
Right.
do the reviews, try to apply some of these ideas.
Of course.
And basically, I mean, it's basically like weightlifting, right? I mean, at first you start and it's like you don't have any muscles to do it. But as you try to develop the ability to see what the conflict is, the
True.
ability to reduce it to something, um, to see where it appears, then you're going to be building your muscle, you basically your storytelling muscles,
Right.
right? That you will be applying to the books you read. And this is
Hmm.
really, both the books you read, also this short thing that you're writing, and also your longer work, your memoir or your thesis statement or your whatever it is, your thesis or whatever it is that you're writing, or your book of fiction. You take these same ideas. This is my feeling. I believe that they apply everywhere
Right.
because storytelling isn't a bunch of rules that someone made up.
Hmm.
Storytelling is something that developed along with our brains, and our
Of course.
brains and stories developed together over a long, long time.
Right. No, that is true.
Um, well, yeah. So Ram, let's look at your work just a little bit as an
Sure.
example, and of course it's gonna feel a little bit like a setup because you're gonna be like, wait a second, we didn't have this talk before, and now you're.
No, no, I love
I
it.
just
I
didn't use
actually
it.
love
I,
this
I
session.
know
So
that I know.
I set myself up
Okay,
intentionally.
I
I
know
set
that you're
myself up
prone.
intentionally.
Okay, I know you're a professional because like the thing with a professional writer is my business all my life has been to
Right.
try to take everything in.
Right.
I am not trying to reject anything.
Right.
Like I went through all my schooling, and I was like, I had this professor. He had some movie scripts done, and he would be considered like a small screenwriter.
Hmm.
He's not a big screenwriter by any means, right? And he would say things, and there would be people in my class who'd be like, "The guy's an idiot. He doesn't know anything. Da 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 da. He's not even read James Joyce Ulysses. Oh, he's so dumb." And I'd be like, "What's the value of that? What's the
Right.
value of pushing his ideas away? I want to
Absolutely.
understand it. He's saying something.
Yeah.
Bring it in.
Undoubtedly.
Try and figure it out." Um, so that's the biggest strength of a writer, the ability to take everything in,
Right.
and then just try and have the faith that you're going to be able to do something with it,
Yeah, that's
afterwards. And if
important. Yeah.
you
And
know,
faith and discipline, I would say.
but it actually works in balance, Ram. I mean, I know, and for all of you, I know that you do a lot of writing. It works in balance. We can take a
Hmm.
lot in if we're
True.
also typing it up and trying to give it form, and we're trying to give it function, a form and a function and a usefulness to the world. That is basically what we're doing. We're a kind of a conduit of taking stuff in and then making
That's
these
it.
things go out. And
Right.
that's, a lot of writers have thought about us that way, as just being a conduit, and I am in that school. We're a conduit.
Right.
We're not. That is our personality. Our personality is take stuff in, try and get stuff out, and see the world accurately. We
Right.
don't have a dog in this fight, you
Right.
know.
So, Otis, I've been married 15 years,
Um,
so I know all about taking it in, taking feedback in.
yeah. So right,
Right.
right. Well, the thing is, okay, so like the truth of the story is, like in any relationship, right? So when
Right.
you first get into a relationship, it's just like the protagonist and the antagonist, right? That thesis statement, that thesis statement, you think this, you're wrong, it's this. Well, that's how we all enter relationships, right?
Right.
But we don't realize that the antagonistic force, you know what? They think they're right and they think you're wrong. So
Hmm.
now what are you gonna do?
Right.
Right? You have to
Right.
work together.
Of
It
course.
it doesn't make any it makes no sense, right? It makes
Right.
no sense to believe that you're right and really everyone else in the world is wrong. It doesn't
Yeah,
make
I
any
agree. I
sense.
agree.
I
Absolutely.
mean, once we
Absolutely.
right, but that's how we all start. So I mean, I never knew so I was never right about so much than when I was 22. Oh my
Right.
God. I had it all worked out at 22, and it has been a degrading event ever since then.
Right. I understand what that feels like.
Okay. Okay, so let's we're going to talk about some of these other works. So I don't want to get too bogged down, and you probably yourself will see what some of the issues are with this review
Absolutely.
from my point of view now. Um, but we'll just use it as an object example. So so as I start reading, so I'm reading this review as a person who doesn't know this book. We
Mm.
want to, in our review, and the same with our stories. I've said this before. Like, I don't have any control over how a person gets to my book and opens it. I have
Mm.
no control, none.
Mm.
The bookseller, where it's placed on the bookshelf, et cetera, where it's buried on the internet, whatever it is, I have no control. But I do have control as soon as they open that book.
Mm.
This is the point where I colloquially will say, I grab them by the throat and I do not let go.
Right.
So, and let me say something about this person. I don't know who this person is. I don't know if they know the things that I know. I don't know if they even, I mean, probably we use the same language, but I don't know what our cultural context is. I don't know anything about them. I only know that they're not me. They
Right.
are not me. So I want to, and I don't say, okay, this person walked over and they are like this or they're like that or they know these things. I don't want them to read my work.
Mm.
I never say I don't want someone to read my work. I
Of
want
course.
every single person that opens my book, that looks at my first sentence, to read my work and not be able to put it down. That is my standard.
Right.
That is my standard. And so in this story, so I mean, one of the big things, of course, is that a play based on Ramayana, right? I don't know what that is. So I mean, forgive me, and I'm sorry. My cultural context does not include that. You
Interesting.
don't
Right.
you don't want to lose me. Like I
Hmm.
might be a reader for this book. I might be a reader for this play. You don't know because you don't.
Okay.
Just because I don't know that doesn't mean I don't want to read the book, right? And
Hmm.
you need to take care of that aspect of the audience. Those
Right.
people who do, but you also want to think, okay, so there are people who do know that story. I'm going to assume, right? So they
Right.
do already know that story, and but you also want to communicate to them, right?
Right.
So you're not just communicating to them that old story that they already know, you're
Hmm.
also going to tell us how this is a fresh version. But you
Ah,
have to
okay.
take care of both of us, right?
Right.
So, what I would do, I would suggest doing what I'm already sort of outlining. Begin by trying to isolate what is the conflict that what is the essential conflict that this playwright is getting to in this work that is new and fresh that we have not seen before?
Right.
If you can, so that is the majority of your work.
Correct.
We tend to think like maybe as a reviewer we think that, oh, I read the book, let me review it. Like on Amazon, I didn't like this. My wife yelled at me that morning and my coffee got cold, so I really hated this book. Thank you. You know, we
Right.
we, we want to try and avoid that. We want to do the work of writing the review really while we're reading and thinking about the work. There's
Right.
something in this work that we really like. And Ram, I totally believe that this work affected you.
I did,
But
of course.
what I'm going to suggest you haven't done yet is figured out why it did,
Yeah,
right?
that is
And
true.
that's the hard work that we do.
Mm. Mm.
That is
Right.
that is the work we do. And to get to that, like, why is this retelling, and why is the way this kind of investigates this conflict in a particular nuanced and new way? Why
Hmm.
was that effective, and why does it add to our understanding of this older story?
Right.
How does this add to it, and add finally to our lives, and make this story relevant to us today, to the reader?
Right.
This is the line that we're taking. So
Mm.
So, so in this piece, I would suggest try to get to that conflict, because that's the thing that either
Right.
the fact of the matter is, if it's about this nuanced relationship of a man and a woman investigating how to carry on among great trials, whatever it is. Okay,
Mm.
when I read that first paragraph, if that does not interest me, I pick
Right.
this up and I read the conflict, and I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't interest me because I actually was looking for a book about raising pugs, so so that's not for me. So then
Right.
I stop. The opening paragraph is a great place to say either this review is for you or it isn't. You came here by
Mm.
accident, I understand. But
Okay.
if you came here because you wanted to know about this essential conflict, then you're in the right place,
Mm.
right? And and this is something to know about our reader. All of our readers are looking for something. They are looking. That's why they opened the book. That was their motivation. I know that from the get-go.
Mm.
They wanted to escape their world. They wanted to investigate this thing. They want some help in their lives. That's why we listen to stories. We listen to stories because we
Mm.
want help
Ah,
in how
okay.
to live. So tell them how this book is going to help them.
Right.
And if they're like, well, I don't think this is gonna help me. I think a pug is gonna help me. So, okay, there you go. They think their own thing. Let them go.
Right.
Bye.
Right. Yes.
But what we really want to do is get someone who thinks a pug is gonna help them, and then we're gonna tell them, no, this is gonna help you.
Mm. Yeah.
That's what we really want.
Right.
And that's how we expand the audience for these works. You're
Right.
passionate about this work, and you're passionate about it. I completely believe that it's for a great reason.
Mm.
Get the reason onto the
Right.
page, not your
Yeah.
reaction, not your positive reaction, but
Mm.
get that on the page, because that's the hook that got you, and it's the hook that is going to get the reader too.
Right.
Then
Yeah.
basically what you have to do here, because you're dealing with something that's a little bit esoteric, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to contextualize it.
Mm.
Malcolm Gladwell had the same issue. So Malcolm Gladwell is basically dealing with this issue of, he's going to start his book. He's going to say, you presently do not think that understanding the way viruses propagate throughout the world is important to your life. However, trends describe how the future will unfold, and the way that viruses propagate works in the same way that trends propagate.
Mm.
Oh, wow, blew my mind, right? So it's true. I didn't think viruses were important, but now that you told me this, my God. And now, not only that, you have this very tangible, concrete thing, viruses,
Yeah.
to discuss something that's sort of abstract and difficult for me to understand,
Right.
trends. I love it. Okay, let me buy your book and let me teach it and let me tell everyone that you're a genius. Okay, so
Hmm.
you have something to do in this regard here too. So
Right.
you have this um, Ramayana, and you need to tell the reader sort of like why this retelling, what is the Ramayana? Why
Right.
is that important? And then why further is this retelling important?
Hmm.
So you have to contextualize it for us.
Right.
It's only after you've done those two things, established the context and contextualized, that you then can go on and talk about your experience with the reading. And so your
Right.
experience covers the middle, that covers you reading it. It's like, I found, this is the place for, I found the dialogue engaging, the representation of the characterization was
Right.
profound. And then you have examples. You always want to go to examples so that the reader can see that you're talking about the work, not just your feeling about the work.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
and then you're, and then, and then you come to an ending. It's like, for those of you who do not know the Ramayana, I might suggest that you go to some original sources first,
Hmm.
before you read this delicate and nuanced interpretation of the story.
Right.
But for those of you who already know it, this story is going to open up a new world of understanding about this ancient tale. Da
Right.
da, you know. Or you might say, whether you know the story or not, this is going to be an engaging read that's going to take you someplace that you've never been before. But those of you who do know the ancient story are going to find this a little bit weak in terms of its interpretation of da 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 da. You can say whatever you want at that point,
Hmm.
but
Right.
we're building it upon this platform again with the idea that we are not writing our review for ourselves. We're writing the review for someone who's by happenstance happens to click on it or open it or find it in a bookstore or whatever they've done. And now you want to give them everything that will inspire their passion.
Right.
That's what we
Right.
do. Because if we don't do that, we're not motivating anyone to do something because we're
Agreed.
finally we're finally trying to motivate a person to do. Right? They're either going to buy the book, or maybe we want to get them to buy a different book, or we want them to buy no book. Whatever we're trying to make them do something, and the only way we get them to do something is by making them feel something.
Hmm. Right.
We don't do it by telling anyone anything.
Right.
Unfortunately, I mean, I can tell you about marine biology, and it's not going to get you to be a marine biologist.
Of course.
But if I give you a rundown of marine biologists and their take-home salaries throughout then maybe that convinces you. I don't know. Like I got to show you something to make you do something. I
Right.
got to make
Of
you feel
course.
something like, oh my
Right.
goodness, if I were a marine biologist, my life would be amazing,
Right.
right? So if I think that, then maybe I become a marine biologist. But we have to
Hmm.
make the reader feel in order to make them do.
I have a question
Okay,
actually. Uh,
so
oh, okay.
yeah,
Uh, uh,
Dorella,
in
yes.
this kind of stories, which is very abstract, philosophical, I studied nature, which is epics and
Sorella, your voice is coming through very faint and broken. I'm not sure if others are also experiencing the same thing.
Yeah. Barely able to hear.
can I am I audible now?
Yeah. Now you
Better.
are.
Now better. So these kind of stories, which is like a retelling of Gita or retelling of Ramayana, which is little abstract, has philosophical part to it, and so many aspects to it. How do I condense it? Like, how do I put the philosophy in the thing? Do I have to put the philosophy? Do I have when I'm placing the conflict in the middle, discussing the conflict? How do I go about doing that?
um, this is the hard part about writing. So we're always in the process of doing essentially, I think, one of three things. We either give a lot of attention to something, or we summarize, right? We reduce, or we omit. These
Right.
are the things we do. We give attention by expanding, we summarize, or we omit. Of course, if you're dealing with you're dealing with this, you know, ancient, I'm guessing, forgive me, I really should do my research beforehand, but you're looking at this ancient story that has a lot of philosophy in it. How are you going to describe that? Well, you have to decide, am I going to describe it in 1,000 pages, or 100 pages, or in 3 pages? And depending on that is going to tell you how you're going to write about it. If you're doing it in a review, you're going to do it very quickly. And maybe you do it by saying it's not possible to discuss all the philosophy and implications of this ancient tale. However, it is meant to lead the way in regard to human struggle in the universe. Maybe that's a right. So I've summed up something in a very short period of time. Um, it's a story that many know well, um, and continues to inspire, et cetera, et cetera. So you're just coming up with a
Right.
summation that's going to be brief, and
Okay.
then you step away from it. But if you want to deal this, this is the this is the trouble of this is the difficulty of writing. This is basically the thing that we're doing all the time, deciding what do we give attention to, what do we reduce, and what do we omit,
Okay.
right? This is our job. Remember,
Okay.
we take everything in, we take everything in, but we can't put everything out, right? When we're typing, we take it all in, but we can't put it all out. We formulate it, we reduce it, we focus the attention of our audience on this, on this, and on this, and not on that, and not on that. Um,
And yeah,
that's
another
it.
question
That's
I
that's
had
our
was
that's our struggle.
okay. Okay. So when I'm
Yeah.
putting it, the
It,
philosophy is something what I like about it. So I'm not putting my personal opinion there, as you mentioned. I will not put my personal opinions, but the philosophy I'm choosing, or from the conflict, is what's appealing to me. So should I highlight only those parts, or just the philosophy which is describing the conflict only?
well, so if you're writing something about, okay, I like the philosophies in this
Hmm.
work.
Right.
Okay, so again, let's return to our model. So who is our audience? Well, our audience are people who do not like those philosophies. This is what we have to remember. We're trying to communicate with people who do not have the same ideas that we do. So
Right.
that means we're basically saying that these philosophies are useful and beneficial over other philosophies. So, these philosophies will help us to achieve this and this and this and this and this. Whereas you read the philosophy of Nietzsche, right? And you read the philosophy of, the Stoics, or you ascribe to these philosophies.
Okay.
So so you also have to understand the things that you're finding in this philosophy, other people are finding things in other philosophies.
Okay.
They are your audience, so why are finding things in this philosophy better than finding things in these philosophies? Remember, the basic issue is, you think this. Okay, I'm going to put my hand over here. You think this. You're wrong. It's this. Remember, Ron and I just talked about every relationship that we're ever going to have. I think I'm right, and wow, it's so incredibly weird that you also think you're right.
Yes.
Oh my God. So what are you going to do with that? There's no place where you're not going to communicate. Okay, I think I'm right, and I think you're a total idiot that has no idea about how to live your life. You're not going to communicate with them that way. So you have to figure out who is your audience. This is the main thing to emphasize. Who are you trying to talk to? If you think this is the right philosophy, right?
Right.
And you're just trying to communicate to other people who already think it's the right philosophy,
Okay.
you don't need to write anything. You can spend your time doing something else. Am I right? I mean, what what's the point? Because what is the outcome? I believe this, and you believe it too. Let's spend 5 hours talking about it. I don't see the outcome of that. I mean, except for in commiseration. Commiseration is important. It's important for people to be unified and all of that. So I'm not against commiseration. But in writing, we're trying to communicate with other people, not simply reflections of ourselves. So
Right.
that would be my suggestion. Always think about every story as being engaged in this. We can just think of them as two antagonistic forces, of which you're one of them. You're an antagonist, and someone else is an antagonist, and that's who you're trying to communicate with. So how do you do that? How do you reduce what the issue is so that you can have a conversation? And when you're talking about philosophies, the issue is about, how does a philosophy benefit the way we live our lives, and what does it mean to benefit ourselves even? I mean, if you're going to get philosophical about it, what does that even mean?
Okay.
In what way?
Okay.
Like I, you know, there was I did an Indic workshop, many years ago, and I mean, there were so many things in that workshop that just like really kind of blew my mind, given my, we're all sort of isolated in our cultural bubble, right? And so I've definitely been isolated in my cultural bubble. But I remember there was a writer that said, well, the essential conflict is between monotheism and polytheism, between Hinduism and, let's say, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, right? They're all monotheistic religions, and Hinduism is polytheistic. And that was like, and then I said, and in a way, in the polytheistic, religious worldview, there's a lot of different characters that you can identify with. They each have individuated personalities, and it's as if they're all working together, almost as a kind of community, that represent different, different personalities, right? And that becomes a model for how to have a kind of social organization, as opposed to the monotheistic religions, which have just one deity up top, which is the authority over all else.
Right.
And I was like, I'm going to demonstrate without words, right? Like I was like, wow, that was amazing. I mean, that, and so, Sorella, that sort of describes a little bit like if you're going to say, so if this is if polytheism is a philosophy or a way to suggest a model of the workings of the universe, it's like, well, I could see why that was beneficial. I could see that. So anyway, I throw that out there as maybe an example. Or there was again, I mean, I've been so happy with my work with some Indic Academy writers. There was someone else who was telling me again. I have a small cultural bubble, and I come from the U.S., so I mean we have a history of like 5 days, right? In comparison to India, and they were saying, this writer was saying, well, the thing is, from the Indian perspective, India was a civilization for a very long time before the British ever got there, right? And
Right.
did their colonial thing, right?
Right.
So from the Indian point of view, there's a much longer arc, right? There's a much longer arc of which colonialism is just a blip. I mean, it can be something, it can even be significant, but it is not the only thing, right? We were talking about a civilization that was a developed philosophical civilization for thousands of years before that ever occurred. Thousands of years, 15,000 years maybe, right? Before something happened 400 years ago. So, and I was like, so I'm going to demonstrate, right? Because that was meaningfully expressed to me, and it was meaningfully expressed because that person who was expressing those ideas understood that my context, they understood me as the audience in a sense. They understood that I was not able to conceptualize what they wanted to express about Indian culture,
Right.
but they could express it to me by understanding that my cultural context is like this. And so once they understand that my cultural context is like this, then they have an ability to express how their cultural context is actually like this. You think it like this, and totally understandable. You're a moron. You're from America. But I understand. That was a joke again.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, but you understand like this. You have, right? So this is the work we do. But the work we do, I want to go back to this, is so much about thinking about our audience, right?
Right.
What do we need to do to bring them? We're using writing to convey ideas. What do we need to do that? Do we create characters who are at odds? Do we create a thesis statement? Do we create do we create music? Do we create uh, delicious food? We are making things in order to communicate to others. And um, the more we think about those others, rather than just thinking about us, which is not, that's too closed. That's not our job. Our job is to take things in and be a conduit to give to others. And that's how we
And
influence and change the world. That's our method.
balance between those who those who don't agree with us, don't know about the philosophy, and those who know, like those who commiserate, and those who do not believe in those philosophy. Should we keep a balance between the two while we write a review?
Right. Well, right. So I just want to go back into, like those who do not believe. What we need to understand is, why do they believe what they believe? Like, why does, Otis, this American, why does he believe that America is the center of the universe? Well, that's a good question. It's because I live in America and that's the only information I get. So to understand why, again, it's much different than, remember, I believe this, you're a complete moron that has absolutely no perception of anything, and therefore I'm right. That does not work. We can't communicate to people like that because no one thinks that they're a complete idiot. And in fact, they're not, right? They're a human being just like we are, and they develop their feelings and beliefs based on their contextualized experience just like we do. So now once we can see that, now we can start to communicate. I am like you. That's where we start. That's how we understand the audience. We are not actually, it's not me and you are different. No, we are the same. And through our sameness, we've come to our same sort of positions and feelings about the things. So now we're understanding why they're them and why we're us. Now
Right.
we can start to communicate.
Okay. Oh,
And but the thing that is universal beyond all, again, I don't want to get too highfalutin about it, but what I believe is universal beyond all of these belief systems is we are storytelling animals.
right.
We are storytelling animals. Go look at, please. In your own places. I was looking recently at the cave paintings, the
Right.
oldest cave paintings. 20,000 years ago, in a cave in Ethiopia, people are putting handprints.
Right.
If you've ever seen that, it's incredible. And what's going on with them when they do that? They put their handprint and they're like, that's me. Or they put their handprint again, they're like, that's me. Right? They're having this, their mind is being blown. They're telling a story,
Yes. That they
right?
existed at the
They
point.
draw in the cave, they draw, yeah. So our brains, stories are a way that we organize the universe and have helped us survive and even flourish. So So that's universal. We, regardless of our belief systems, regardless of what you're trying to communicate, this is why I say it this way, and this is why I love teaching stories, is like, I'm just going to tell you again and again, tell a story. Tell a story. And that's the way you're going to communicate with people. Because that's the way our brains work. It's universal. There's no person on earth that doesn't tell stories.
Yeah.
And they tell it the same way over and over again because it's about the individual dealing with the world for the purpose of survival advantage. That's
Right.
why we tell stories.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you come around the wildebeests like this and into the canyon like there, then you will have food afterwards. It's like this. Round them up here, then go in and slaughter them, and then have a big feast. Okay, so I get it. That's a story. Beginning, middle, end.
Right.
Right? Do it like that, and you will be happy. That's
Yeah.
what a story is.
And thank you for giving me this insight. Otherwise, my whole life I would have been writing my own personal opinion instead of a review. Thank you for that insight. I have been doing that for so long. I had to change my track now that I understand. And thank you for that.
The thing about changing your tack too, okay, so the real benefit of all of our storytelling, the work of it is hard, but we grow. We grow by doing it. Right? And that's the thing, when we write a review, like we might think, I'm going to write a review and I'm going to make this book, is going to, I'm going to do all these great things. But really, our grappling with this story, we use the story mechanism for ourselves. And then the benefit of us doing it for ourselves, that is what we give to the audience.
Right.
We have the first relationship with story, and then we give basically what I consider the artifact of that relationship to the reader so that they can have that experience too. Right? So,
and just
like I just said about that cave with the...
Right,
yeah.
right.
Go ahead.
And sorry to cut you short. There's one more
we
question
better
I had.
go.
And yeah, question would be if I'm writing a short story, if I'm writing a review of a collection of short stories, and the theme is mostly on women, a woman telling her own about her own life. So in that case, how do I present a conflict? Do I write one line from each story, like summarize each short story in the main body?
Okay, so that's a complex question. It's a complex question. So this is very true of people who publish collections of short stories. They want to understand what's sort of unifying the work. So there's a couple different tacks. One, if you have a woman writing short stories, let's say she's a contemporary woman writing short stories about contemporary women writing short stories, there's something that's going to be unifying that collection. And so you do want to talk about that. You probably want to talk about, in the same way in short stories and short story publishing, there's usually a couple stories that are like, just like albums, right? Like there's one hit out of the album, and then there's the rest of the album. So the same way in a collection of short stories, there's usually a story or two. It'll either be, so this is the way it generally works. The second best story in the entire collection will be the first story, and the best story of the entire collection will be the last story. Okay, so if you want to do a quick job as a review of short stories, you can say, this writer is representing a new voice, a fresh contemporary take on modern da 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 da, right? So you talk about the stories generally, right? Because that's what's being offered. With this kind of work, you're getting kind of a voice, a new voice. So if you can isolate some aspect of that voice, then that's something that you want to put out there. Then you would say the stories often deal with the difficulty of young women in a traditional society where the obligations of having a job and a family, or whatever, so now you can talk a little bit about what the conflict is that this writer tends to deal with, which you'll find. You'll find that you've read all the stories and you realize they have a certain theme that unifies them. So you can talk about that. And then you talk about in the premiere story, da 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 da, a young woman, and now you get really concrete. So you've done all the work. You've contextualized the work. So you take a book and you contextualize it among all works, right? So there's all these short story writers that are doing this. And then this writer is doing this specifically, their voice. What
Okay.
makes it different? Then we have stories that deal with the themes, and then we have this particular story, and then we say, if then we make our appeal to the audience. If you are a person who's enjoyed the work of Willa Cather and so and so and so and so, you'll find these stories intriguing. But even those who are reading crime fiction will love this fresh take on the urban landscape. There you go. I just wrote another review about a book I made up.
Okay. Thank you for this insight. And
Uh,
you mentioned a review should be short. How short do you? I mean, how many words do you think a review should be? Is anything specific you have in mind?
well, that's really up to you, and it really has to do with where you're looking to place it. So if you're writing a review on Amazon, I think that you're looking at someone devoting how many seconds to reading your work? 30 seconds. So that's going to be pretty short. If you're putting it into a journal, and once you do the work to writing a review, my suggestion to you is that you write a couple different versions. The work of writing the review is coming up with these ideas, isolating what the themes are, maybe, or what the conflict is, right? So that you'll notice the theme and the conflict are the same. So once you've done that work, I would suggest writing a short review that you might put into Amazon. And I will tell you personally, if you write a review where you deal with the conflicts without telling people what you feel about them, whether you feel that it's a good book or not a good book, if you do that in Amazon, that review will pop out of the page at the reader because that is not the experience that we have reading reviews, right?
Okay.
But so you have that, you have like a one paragraph review for Amazon. You have a 3 paragraph review for, maybe a journal. There
Okay.
are journals that they want what's called filler. So that's like they have a printed page, but they have this square that's open. And it takes
Okay.
250 words to fill that square.
Right.
So you want a 250 word review, right?
Okay.
And then you have like the New York Review of Books that might publish a 5,000 word review. You
Okay.
might not want to get involved in that or a 1,000 word review. But if you're going to do the work and you really love the work, um, it's not that much. Particularly when you think about the format is always the same. It's just a question of expanding it or summarizing it. Does that make sense? That's what we're doing. You're already focusing on this book. You're basically always going to be writing the beginning, the middle, and the ending. And now it's just a question of writing it in a 50-word form, 250-word form,
Right.
500-word form, etc. Because you expand all of those sections. Basically, the story pattern is an accordion pattern. It doesn't
Right.
matter whether you're writing a poem or you're writing War and Peace. It's an
Okay.
accordion pattern.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Uh, we better talk about some of these other works, or I'm going to get in big trouble. I know trouble is always right behind me. Okay, so let me. Is Jay here today?
Yeah, he's there.
Jay?
Hi.
Oh, he is. Good, 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 good. Let's. Rashma, I'm sorry, Jay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get your piece up here. I'm kind of losing it. Where are you? Where are you? Oh, okay. Okay. So, Jay, I wanted to talk about your story. Where are you? Did I share this already? Wait a second. Sorry, I gotta
Okay.
do something. That's...
Uh,
Okay, Jay, where are you?
Here, my
Okay.
camera seems to be having a problem, but I can hear you.
Okay, great. Can you let's see, we said 7:30. We have to
Yeah.
go fairly quickly, so
Here.
can I just have you um,
Yeah. Camera seems to be having a
can
problem.
you just, I'm sorry, can you just, I just want you to read a little something. I like everyone to read a little something from their work just because that reminds us that we're dealing with someone's work and we don't start treating it like a dissection object that we can just hack apart, right? We want to remember always that the things that you've written because you have a feeling about them, right? I mean, you want to write them and we shouldn't treat them like little, fetal pigs that we're going to strip the skin off of. Okay, so Jay, and I'm doing that because you have a little zoology in your piece, so I'm going to my zoology background.
Right.
Can you read this little section here? This is further down the lane
Yeah.
is another house, and just read that short paragraph.
Yeah. Further down the lane is another house. We used to call it Adagachi Vidu. A literal translation would be House of Tears. In a comic book fueled alliterative bench, we renamed the house to Crying Castle. The family that lived there had an autistic child.
Okay, thank you so much. Um, so, Jay, I found that there was
Should
such
I go
great
on?
writing in this piece,
Okay.
particularly. No, just there because I don't want to run too much overtime, but that's a beautiful section. There's a lot. For me, there was a lot that was really some wonderful writing here. What I really like in your writing is that you both draw upon actual details. You have this guy who says, "Oh, that place is for let." Like no one has ever bought it. I couldn't quite figure out whether it was for sale or for let. But anyway, no one has ever rented it or bought it. And then there's another place that's sold right away. That there's this kind of sense that in this little section that what these kids have done to this place is almost suggesting that it has a curse or put that idea out in the world and maybe other people felt that too and people are staying away from this one place. When you write these details, you draw upon this zoology from time to time and an examination of animals that's really minute. I personally am very fond of that. So like I love details. I love concrete details. And when you have those concrete details and like even that landlord, when he talks and stuff, he's a concrete detail. This writing really comes alive, I think. Um, the big thing in this piece is actually goes back, and the reason I wanted to start with your piece was I think that it has a connection to what we've been talking about in terms of reviews. So the essential thing with stories is that this is sort of like you
Okay.
wandering. I'm not sure whether you're physically. I'm not sure whether it's physical or whether it's just mental, but you're basically going through like the town you've grown up in, and it's almost like a love letter to that town.
Okay.
About the things that are there, but it's not. It's not sappy. It's
Yeah.
not sappy. It's detailed. It's like this place is real. It feels real. All of that was great. The thing that's missing is that it's not really. We don't have protagonist and antagonistic forces very much. So like the, I will always go back to this having a protagonist. So basically,
Okay.
you don't have dynamic action if you only have one thing. So here we have really only this guy who is thinking about his town.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all we have. And though that is really great, and I really enjoyed the writing, I didn't have the dynamic action of something. You know, there there's nothing stopping him. And this is what dynamic action is. It's basically, okay, I'm a protagonist, right? I'm going through the universe. This is not a story. That's not a story. This is a story. I'm going through the universe and something hits me. Something stops me. Something forces me to struggle and find something new. I don't have to find anything new. If I'm going like this, right? If I'm going like this through the universe, I don't have to change. I don't have to find anything new. I don't struggle. Life is peachy. This is not the way of the world, as you know. And we all know it's not the way of the world. So in stories, what we do is we represent the way the world seems to be to us, which is that we're always in conflict with the environment by having these two things in the story. And that's really what this story needs. I really admired your detailed writing, but I was missing the dynamic action. Like, what's at issue here? What are the possibilities?
Okay.
What's stopping this person from? I mean, even if you had, you almost have it in a sense. Like it's close to developing. Like, let's say you were writing about this town, and this character is walking through the town, and he really wants to have a sentimental, he wants to have a sentimental farewell, right? But he's confronted by the details of the town that forbid that sentimentality. Does that make sense? Like, that's a conflict. He wants, so stories are about a protagonist wants something and the antagonistic force stops them from getting it. So those are the two elements, A and B, that we need in our story. So, like, for example, if this guy wants to feel sentimental, I'm going to walk around and I'm going to cry about all the great times I've had in this town. But then he's confronted by, wait a second, that's the place where we made up that story about the autistic child, and that's the place where we, did this, did that. That becomes a conflict, and that creates the dynamic action.
Okay.
You moved. Does that make a little bit of sense?
Yeah. Like you've said, all of this is just warming up. It doesn't really it doesn't really add value to the rest of the story.
Right. We could say, yeah, it's kind of, we don't have the conflict on the page. We're not getting the conflict on the page. And my big suggestion for all of us to save time, because if you can take my word for it, and that's up to you. That's up to you. But if you can say that a story, if this makes sense to you, that a story's dynamic action requires this conflict between two forces, try to get those forces on the page right away.
Okay.
So I'll go back to the story of when I'm reading stories for a journal or a review, if I don't know what's going on in the first page, I don't read the rest of the 12 pages. It's not because I don't like the writing. In this case, I like this writing. Particularly the beginning. The beginning is less, it's more abstract. But once you get to the concrete details, I love this town and I love reading about it. And I love the mentality of this protagonist who's telling me about it. But there's no conflict. And without conflict, I don't learn anything. And since I'm reading it basically to learn and increase my survival chances in the world, I wouldn't continue if I was reading for a journal.
Okay.
But I do have to recognize, and I want to recognize to you, that the writing is really great. So I hope that I don't know what your field of interest is, but I hope you'll keep working on it, because having a flair for writing sentences, that's another thing. That's a great thing. So all you have to learn is you have to learn about getting these forces to interact. But you already have the flair for language, and that's something that I personally had to learn. So, any questions, Jay?
Can I ask a question?
Thank you so much. I will.
No. Okay, thank you, Jay. Yeah. Was that Rashma? What you asking?
Yeah, I wanted to, when we studied playwriting, what we were told was it's the king dies and the queen dies is a story, but the queen dies and the king dies of grief is a plot. So and plays use a plot whereas a narrative doesn't. So I'm now thinking that do the narratives really have to have a plot, because that's what we were taught, that we need a plot essentially, but the storytellers, those who are writing narratives, do not. I mean, it's a general thing. That's what is written in most of the books.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think narrative writers, basically stories are plots. There's two things that are going on. The way I look at it is we basically have character. Two things are going on. There's a character arc. It's about character, and there's a plot. And in most works, the way I see it, sometimes people emphasize plot. So like genre works tend to emphasize plots, like let's say Girl with Dragon Tattoo or something like that, or Tom Clancy or a mystery. They basically are taking us through these twists and turns in the plot, and literary works generally emphasize character, but they both have to occur because what's happening is that you have a character. Basically, narratives. To me, every story is about a human being in the background. That's what other human beings are interested in. There's a human being somewhere. It's the author, it's a character, it's a group, it's something. There's someone somewhere who's undergoing a story arc, which means that they're moving through a series of events. A narrative is just a series of events. So to me, a play is also a series of events. There's no difference. A commercial is a series of events. A movie is a series of events. They're just different mediums for the same thing. So a character moves through a series of events, and at each juncture, that can be a plot point, right? So they're walking down a street. An apple falls on their head. Boom, plot point. They rub their head and they go to the hospital. At the hospital, they see their uncle who had a heart attack. Plot point number 2, right? The uncle says, "You're the only person in my family who's ever loved me. I'm leaving you my estate in blah blah blah." Plot point number 3, right? So it's like every story has both plot points and character, but so they have plot points that the character experiences and the reader experiences by being the audience, through which they engage in their character arc, which is finally going to take them from state A here to B, where they are changed in some way. I think that holds for every single story on Earth, I'm afraid to say.
Okay.
So I don't think there's a distinction there between plays and movies and narratives. They're all narratives. Narrative to me, what it means in its most reduced form is simply a sequence of events.
Okay.
Like your play, for example, which we should take a quick look at too. Let me ask you something. If I go like that, does that change? Did that change for you, or do you see Rashma's play now?
Sorry.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, we see the play. Yeah.
You can? Okay. So just to talk about your play a little bit. So, and this is right now you have a series of events, basically, just like a story does. The story has scenes, they have summaries to get us to the next scene. It's a series of events. You're depicting a series of events, and the audience is experiencing a series of events.
Right.
That's important. Two things are happening. You're writing a series of events, and the reader is experiencing a series of reading events, or they're experiencing a series of visual events, or a series in music of auditory events. It's always the same.
Okay.
And so, like you have, for example, the event of Chutki is watching the TV. right? And then you have the event of Chutki and Baldev together. And then you have the event of, um,
The
you know,
neighbor coming in.
right, the neighbor comes, right? Then you have the event of the letter arrives.
Right,
So that's a series of events.
right,
And and uh, and those are all plots, right? So one of
right,
the plot things is that the letter arrives. That's a plot point. But we have that. We always have that. The apple falls on your head. That's a plot point.
right.
Um, the I was just going to say quickly in this section, I had this strong feeling. I know we talked about Baldev as like this character. He really has a lot of trouble here. He's a little bit like our Willie Lomax in Death of a Salesman, right?
Salesman.
He's a little bit like that character.
Right.
Um, the but I also think that I got to go down to remember her name. Who's
Simran.
the main
Simran.
Simran? Right, Simran so much feels to me like the star of the show. Like there's something about her that feels like she's the star. And as I was reading this, I was feeling like it was just taking so long to get to her entrance.
Right.
Like, it's sort of like I don't know. You're probably not old enough to watch the old Lucy. The Lucy show was something I watched as a kid, right? And she was an incredible comic
Right.
who had her show, and the show would always start. It was kind of a situation comedy like we see now, right? And you can look at almost anyone, and this has some of that feeling of it, like a situation comedy in a sense. They seem like comic characters in their way, and but anyway, in that show, it would always start with there would be a couple people doing something, doing the setup, and then Lucy would come in, right? And and your character of Cimarron is like that character. She's the one that all the light goes to. Um, and
Why
so
not?
I
Okay, why not Baldev? I mean, Baldev is the one who's going to have a maximum character arc. He's the one who's in the face, and he's the one who's going to undergo a transformation. That is why we stopped looking at Simran as a protagonist, and maybe I think that Simran is maybe a catalyst protagonist, and Baldev is the one who is the protagonist because he undergoes a change. Um, I'm just
mhm.
looking at
um,
different optics.
you
Yeah.
yeah you can decide. I mean, it's like it's one of those things. Okay, so whether you've seen, I'm sure you can imagine for yourself this show, this Lucy show, right? Lucille Ball, right? You can watch the old shows, but like when you see the beginning, like Fred Mertz is not the main character. Fred Mertz is a great comic character,
Right.
but he doesn't. I mean, as a person dealing with plays, which is by further extension movies, we know that there's these characters that have a kind of charisma to them,
Hmm.
and it's it. But these are problems that we can think about solving.
Right.
I think it could easily be both of their stories. You
Right.
don't know, but still, I feel it's just a feeling of mine. You can take it for what it's worth, but I feel like it just takes a long time to set
Simple
up what
comment.
we're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the short way to say it. It's just taking a long time to set up. We're
Set up.
spending too much time with the letter. We're playing too much time with the,
Make it quicker.
um,
Yeah.
you know, and when I was in high school, I would never get out on stage, but I did the stage management.
Okay.
And one of the big parts of the one of the big things that the director did was she cut big scenes out.
Right.
The play was already going to be 2 hours long, and she would just cut out stuff. And it's like that was pretty amazing to me. But when I was reading this, I thought to myself, a director might decide that they want to cut, you
Cut a few
know,
things. Yeah. Yeah.
and and for you that might be something that you want to do instead,
Yes.
rather than leave it to the director to
Okay.
make, you know, another way to express it is to have more economy, right?
Right.
You know, and sometimes it just takes us, we warm up because we love writing our characters, we love writing that dialogue.
Exactly.
I love writing it too. I love
Yeah.
my characters. And so we get them going back and forth, and after they've gone back and forth 6 times, you realize you've taken up,
Space.
5 minutes.
Yeah. Right.
Um, And so
So,
you're like, okay, maybe I
Otis,
just have to do this quicker. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, we should wrap up in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Okay, let me see if I can go to just this story then. So I wanted Madhavi, is it, if I'm saying that right? Are you here? Yes.
Yeah. Hi.
Okay.
Am I audible?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I see you. Thanks. And thanks for submitting something. Okay, so in this story, let's see. Um, so this is another story. We've talked about works like this a little bit before,
Okay.
but this goes back to the idea of thinking about your audience. So what does your audience want? This is, I've said this many times, but these are the things that we have to repeat to ourselves often. What does our audience want? And this is what I think, that no matter what, right? Remember I said I cannot control this person who's going to my book, but when they open it, I do not want to let them go, right?
Sure.
So, but why have they walked over and opened my book? This is the big question. So I think I have some idea. It's because wherever they are, wherever they're walking, the world around them, they do not want to be there.
Yeah.
They want to be in my book, right? They want to go into another world. You are absolutely writing another world here, right? So I'm coming to your story. I want to go to another world, and then I start reading your book. Now the question is, do you let me in? Do you let me into that world? I will understand your world in the same way that I understand my world, by seeing it, by touching it, tasting it, smelling it, hearing the sounds, sensory details. Sensory details means that I'm dealing with concrete objects that are all around me. Like, I know that I'm in my office, not because I have some mystical sense of it, but because I look at my computer, I see, the door, I see the fence outside, I see the bushes that are over the fence, I see my couch. All of those things tell me that I'm here. So, when the reader comes to your work, you need to give them those things so that they know that they're in your world. That is what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Concrete detail, sensory perception, that's what we have to get on the page. So the only thing I have here in terms of reality is she sat in front of the mirror. So in a sense, all I know about this whole space is that there's a mirror. I don't know what the mirror hangs on. I don't know what she stands on. I don't know what she sits on. I don't know what's next to the mirror. I don't know what it smells like. I don't know what it sounds like. I don't know any of those details. And so what's happened to me in a basic way is that I've come to your story looking to be in your world, but when I started reading, I wasn't anywhere.
Okay.
That's like the simple way to put it. So the story, the character is incredible. I love this character that you have. I love the problem that she has.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to be in the world. The character is a vehicle for my experience as a reader. I want to identify with the character, and I want to have the experience that she has. That's it. Rashma has the same thing. I want to identify with the character, right? They're the character in the story that goes on the arc, right? That has all these things happen to them, and then they end up changed. And I get to experience that change by going with them. So that's one thing that I really want. You have that character.
So maybe if I said, sorry, am I interrupting?
No. Go ahead.
So maybe instead of the mirror, if I had said that she's sitting in, say, in front of a dressing table, that would have made more sense.
Right, but you want to get a character in an entire world. So, like if we think about
In
it
totality.
with Rashma's play, with Rashma's play, it's exactly the same. She's going to have a character, Baldev, but Baldev is going to be standing on a stage, and the stage is going to it has some things. It has a vase with flowers. It has a couch. It has a door. It has the stage is a reality that I then get to witness that. I witness Baldev in a world. And so, because I don't want to be in my world, I want to be in that world. And so you have to give me all the things that make me imagine being in that world and being that character. Yeah. So this is the essence of story. Like, I just go back to this, just think of this simple idea. The only thing I'm telling you about me, you don't know anything else about me. You know nothing. You don't know whether I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm, American, I'm Indian. You know nothing, right? But you know that I want to escape my world and go into your world. So know that and make it happen.
Yeah.
The other thing that does happen here that we've all discussed quite a lot is that we start with this one character, and so that's basically establishing our point of view. After the first paragraph, you go into backstory. So that's a big danger with backstory, but we'll talk more about that. We always talk about backstory, but basically we want to get the reader to experience the world through a character's point of view. That's the most powerful thing we have in narrative. So try and establish that point of view, put them in the world, and then have them experience the world. And I experience it by going along with them. That creates the most powerful stories. It's the easiest. I mean, it's really difficult to do, but if we can do it, it's the easiest way for us to bring that reader into this experience. Okay, I better quit.
So thank you, Otis, for next Sunday's meet. People, you can send in your review samples. You can, if you're writing reviews, if you've already written reviews, you can send those, and again, send them as PDF documents, double spaced, Times New Roman, font size 12. And we'll cover them, and we'll use them to drive through some of the reviews.
Look, if you do the reviews, think about it this way. Okay, so you see what a horror and terror I am, right? Try to write the review so I want to read the book. And you know how I am. If you tell me that I should read the book, I am not going to read it. I promise you. I hate being told what to do. Ask Zandi. Zandi's like, you hate being told what to do more than anyone on earth. I'm like, I don't think so. I think everybody hates it. But do not tell me to buy the book. Do not try and sway me with your fancy language. I'm going to see through it. If you tell me that the characterization is amazing, I am going to go, no, I will not read it. Make me want to buy that book. That's the mandate. And you know what? You can do it. And if you make me want to buy that book, I will promise you, I will buy that book. Because I can't resist. You see how I am? I cannot resist it. So make me your audience, and I think that will work. And you have that little parrot, right, Ram, of the Otis parrot saying, "What would Otis say about?"
I told you I love that parrot.
Okay, thank you all. Always a pleasure. Great to see you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Otis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.